Journey IFC strives to create safe spaces to worship God. Know that you are welcome just as you are, regardless of religious background or lack thereof, skin color, political affiliation, sexuality, age, culture, or any other label you own or society throws on you. You are welcomed and celebrated here just as you are.
The story we're about to read is a dramatic one, so hang on to your hats. Comes from the New Testament. It's in chapter 27 of Acts, which is a story about all the stuff that happened after Jesus. We're catching up with Paul and he's on a ship. But soon a violent wind called a nor'easter rushed down from Crete. Since the ship was caught and could not be turned head on into the wind, we gave way to it and were driven. We were being pounded by the storm so violently that on the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. And on the third day, with their own hands, they threw the ship's tackle overboard. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest raged, all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul then stood up among them and said, "Men, you should have listened to me and not set sail from Crete, and thereby avoided this damage and loss." And then they threw Paul overboard. No, that wasn't it. "I urge you now to keep your courage, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For last night there stood by me an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I worship, and he said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before the emperor. You have to make it to Rome. And indeed, God has granted safety to all those who are sailing with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told by that angel. But we will have to run aground on some island.' Just before daybreak, Paul urged all of them to take some food, saying, 'Today is the 14th day you have been in suspense and remaining without food, having eaten nothing. Therefore, I urge you to take some food, for it will help you survive. For none of you will lose a hair from your heads.' After he had said this, he took bread and, giving thanks to God in the presence of all, he broke it and began to eat. Then all of them were encouraged and took food for themselves. We were in all 276 souls on that ship. After they had satisfied their hunger, they lightened the ship by throwing the wheat into the sea. In the morning, they did not recognize the land, but they noticed a bay with a beach on which they planned to run the ship ashore if they could. So they cast off the anchors and left them in the sea. At the same time, they loosened the ropes that tied the steering oars. Then, hoisting the foresail into the wind, they made for the beach. But striking a reef, they ran the ship aground. The bow stuck and remained immovable, but the stern was being broken up by the force of the waves. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners so that none might swim away and escape. But the centurion, wishing to save Paul, who was a prisoner on his way to Rome, kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and make for the land, and the rest to follow, some on planks and others on pieces of the ship. And so it was that all were brought safely to land."
So like I said, we're coming to the end of our Mind the Gap series. So that means we have to somehow be getting past this gap that we've been talking about for so long. And this one today is actually maybe my favorite story from this series. I think it is so interesting because Paul goes on this fascinating adventure. And I think it's fascinating for us, probably not so much for him. It's probably terrifying. And at this point, he's been kind of bounced around a lot from different judges who are all trying to bring some charge against him. And this started because, the Jewish people didn't like that he believed in the resurrection of Jesus and that even people could be resurrected. And so all these people are trying to, pass him off saying, okay, we're going to charge him for this. And then he goes to the next place and is found innocent. And then they send him to the next layer in the hierarchy and he keeps going. And the last step is to the emperor in Rome. And apparently this only happens because Paul appealed to the last guy. And the last guy said, well, if you didn't appeal, I would have just said you're innocent. So I'm going to send you anyways. And so Paul is on this journey to Rome to see the emperor. And he's taken by this centurion who's a guard whose name is Julius on a boat. And there's many other prisoners with him. We don't know how many of them are prisoners, how many work on the boat. We're not sure. But this boat makes several stops along the way. So he's been on this multi-year journey where he's kind of gone through all of these legal battles and been bounced around for years and years and years. And now he's on this boat that's kind of bouncing around for a long time. And so he has to go on this long boat ride to this final judge to see what his fate really is going to be. And we're told that the beginning of the trip is easy, the weather's nice, and they stop at this place called Fair Havens, which is probably the best place to stop, honestly. If you're going to stop anywhere, I would say Fair Havens is the place to go. But apparently it's a bad omen to leave Fair Havens because things get a little rocky after this. But the crew, in their job, they have to take these prisoners and all this cargo that they're trying to sell and take, to markets and all that probably. And they have to leave this Fair Haven despite Paul's advice telling the crew, we shouldn't go. There's going to be danger to all of our lives and the cargo if we set sail. But they have to go. It's their job. Paul's advice is ignored. They have the job to do. And the harbor apparently wasn't good for winter, so they pack up everything and they leave this Fair Haven for the open seas. Our reading today begins at this point in the story. And so we're told that a moderate wind, I guess you could say, that's funny, blows through at this point, and it makes the trip a little bit harder. But then something of storybook and mythological levels happens, and this violent wind comes through, and it even has a name, the Northeastern, and it sounds like something out of the Wizard of Oz, and it's this crazy storm, this crazy wind comes in, and the crew tries to fight back with the wind, but they have no luck. And so what they have to do is they have to give in and let the wind take them. And so the crew begins to lose control. And so they lower the anchors and trying to steady themselves, and they drive on, but things remain dangerous. And out of desperation, they all start throwing cargo overboard. And this is crazy because this is the stuff that is their source of income, their livelihood, and they're just throwing it because they're so terrified. And then it says that after they did that, the following day, they start throwing their equipment, the tacklings, overboard too, all of their ropes, all of their supplies overboard. But the winds keep coming, and the rain does too, and the storm is so dark and cloudy that they neither saw sun or stars for days on end. By this point, all hope is lost. All hope is lost. But Paul makes an interesting move here in the story. He realizes that days into this battle between human and storm, no one has been able to eat any food. But then Paul doesn't feed them at this point. He just reminds them that, hey, I told you this was going to happen, which is I would be so angry if I was on that boat and Paul said, I told you so. But Paul tells everyone this, and then he says, you know what? You're going to be safe in the end. It's going to be okay. And then he tells this story about this angel that appeared to him and in the night and notified him that he has to make it to this emperor in Rome. So everyone with him will be safe so he can make it. And so Paul tells them, keep courage. We're going to make it. We're going to be okay. It makes me wonder if this angel really did appear to him or if he was just trying to get some sliver of hope so they would make it. He just was hoping something was happening. Or maybe an angel really did appear to him and told him that they were going to be safe. But Paul ends this courageous speech by telling these experienced sailors people who know how to handle a boat. He tries to tell them what to do. He says, if we're going to survive, we're going to have to run this ship aground. It doesn't make any sense. We have to crash the boat to live. That doesn't play right. And of course, I can't get rid of my boat. This is my job. And they had hundreds of people on board with them. But at this point, it's been 14 days in the storm, 2 weeks of constant wind and storming and fear and hopelessness. Hoping that they would find some ground when they did this, the crew lets down four anchors, hoping that they'll hit ground or that they'll weigh them down, keep them steady. They do what has worked for them in the past. They drop the anchors, they endure, they fight, they try to stay strong. But Paul, like he said, they haven't eaten in a while, and he remembers this. So, in the midst of this fight for their lives and for their boat, Paul tells everyone to eat because it knows it'll help them survive. Paul takes the bread and he blesses it and he breaks it and he gives it to all aboard. Paul, in the middle of this storm, in the largest gap period of his life, where he's just kind of wandering around on all this legal stuff and now on this boat, he stops and he celebrates a meal that Jesus taught the disciples about, a communion type thing, because Paul communes with everyone on board, even the ones keeping him imprisoned at that moment. All 276 people eat together. And it says that everyone gets enough food to satisfy their hunger, even. And so once this is done, to lighten the boat's load just a little bit more, they take their source of nourishment, the wheat, and they throw it overboard into the crashing waves as well. So the next morning comes and they finally see land in the distance. And so they make a plan. We're going to run the ship aground. Paul's probably thinking, I told you so, but he doesn't say it this time. And so they lighten their load as much as they could. They took one last thing that was once keeping them steady and safe, these four large anchors, and they dropped them into the sea as well. And so with the cargo, their income, the thing that they're shipping, the equipment, their livelihood, and their boat, and all the stuff they need to sail the boat, along with their food, their nourishment, the thing that's keeping them alive, and finally the anchors. They lose it all. They let go of everything. The boat eventually crashes. It hits, a reef, and the ship starts tearing to pieces bit by bit. And in this chaos, the soldiers turn to fear, and they suggest killing the prisoners so that they can't get away and be free. And they're like, yeah, we can kill them, and then we won't get in trouble if they swim off and they make it to freedom. But the centurion, who's this guard that's watching them, he remembers that Paul predicted all of this. And for some reason, he's interested in seeing more of Paul's story and hearing more from him. And so the centurion stops the soldiers from killing all of these prisoners. And he tells everyone that can swim to jump off the boat and swim to shore. We're going to make it. And if anyone can't, grab onto a piece of boat and float in, we'll follow behind you. And so it was that all were brought safely to land in this chaotic and crazy manner. Like I said, I really love this story because it's full of action and drama and some bread, which we all love bread. All great things are happening in the story, even though it's pretty terrifying for Paul and all aboard. And then it has this kind of strange happy ending, sort of. It feels happy because they all survive. Everyone is saved, but so much had to be left behind. So much had to be let go of. And now they're stranded on an unknown shore at the mercy of whoever inhabits the lands they now find themselves upon. In seminary, I took a class on family systems theory. And I don't know if you're familiar with family systems theory, but it's this therapeutic understanding of the world where everything is interconnected in a family type relationship. So everything is interconnected and reacts to one another and lives within these certain roles that the family deems appropriate. And this starts in our family. So to know an individual better, you look at their family system, you see the patterns in their life, you see how they related to their siblings and their parents and their grandparents and how their parents related to their parents. And you look at all this and you can learn more about the individual by learning more about the family. The patterns, the relationships, everything, it's all connected. But this same model, this family systems model, can also be turned inward as well. And so internal family systems, as it's called, we as an individual are also made up of this interconnected family of different parts of ourselves. And so all of these many parts work together to create a system that is how we live in this world. And so with some therapeutic help, we can access different parts of ourselves, maybe younger parts of ourselves, and we can try to work to heal them and to teach them new ways of being in the world. And we can do this by meeting the different parts of ourselves, and in this therapeutic technique, you even name different younger parts of yourself, hurt parts of yourself, and you give them a name, and you acknowledge them, and you thank them for what they've done, and you learn from them, and then you try to figure out how can we change what we're doing. In this work, we're encouraged to rewrite our stories in a way. We try to figure out what used to serve us in the past, our defense mechanisms, the things that kept us safe. And we try to figure out how those defense mechanisms are keeping us, preventing us from healing in our current lives. The old tools and tricks that used to keep us alive and keep us safe may no longer work for us. An example of this may be like the tantrum you had when a kid, where you screamed and threw your arms around to get attention and to I don't know, to get some kind of sympathy, to get your way, whatever you did to kick and scream. Well, now we know that as an adult, screaming and flailing around in our office probably is not going to serve the same purpose. We'll probably get a worse reaction. And so this thing that once kept us alive and got us what we needed, later in our life is no longer serving the same purpose. It probably is keeping us from something even. And so what we do is we acknowledge it and we realize, wow, this no longer serves us in our lives. So maybe we can change it and learn a new defense mechanism. And so you may be wondering about the things that you do in your life, a younger version of yourself, the things that we should let go, but we still hold on to. You may be wondering what those things are that kept you safe at one point and even kept you alive for another day. These could be things you did to please your parents or your families or your past friendships or past relationships. Whatever no longer serves you, that's what we're talking about. What is it that we can let go of right now? Going back to our story today, they were doing everything they normally did to survive, right? They were taking their old scripts and they were reliving them, hoping that it would keep them from death. They threw over things like the cargo and the tackle, but even that wasn't enough. And so they had to let go of more. They had to dig deeper into a younger version of themselves and realize that that tool wasn't working. And so they took the food and even the anchors and threw them into the water. And now the boat was going to be sacrificed too, all so they could live another day. The crew had to let go of the things that once made them money and kept them safe and gave them a job, and they had to try something new. And this wasn't easy. It meant giving up everything and trusting in something beyond themselves. They had to write a new script to serve them in this particular moment. In all of this, though, Paul seemed to have some little glimmer of hope in the midst of all of the chaos. He kept saying to them, have courage, hold on to hope, we're going to make it through. And I wonder if maybe these are Paul's old scripts coming into play for him. To survive, Paul used the whole let go and let God theology, which in this case was pretty dangerous because that's him saying, let go and let God crash the boat, or Jesus take the wheel and turn us into shore and crash the boat. It was a dangerous theology to hold, but for some reason he had this hope. And somehow this hope kept him going in the midst of the storm. And then this hope seemed to help other people when they shared a meal together. Paul noticed everyone was scared and hopeless and hungry. So he fed them with a holy meal, a script, a past thing that was passed down from Jesus in the family system. It makes me wonder if Paul really had hope or if he was just doing what he knew to do. And maybe he was thinking back to when Jesus was about to die and had a very similar Last Supper. Maybe this was Paul just being as scared as everyone else, preparing for his Last Supper too. It seems everyone on board was trying to use these old scripts for safety, and none of it worked. And so they all had to let go of everything and completely crash. And I wonder if we too have to let go sometimes and completely crash. Maybe we too have to leave it all behind. Even the stuff that once kept us alive and fed us and gave us money and a career or even a family, all of it has to go at some point. Maybe we need to let all of it go and ride these shattered pieces to the shore, even if we don't know what the shore holds in store for us when we get there. I think the reason I like this story so much is because how messy it is. Nothing goes the way it should, and everyone still somehow survives in the end. And in the middle of all of the chaos, this mixed group of soldiers and sailors and prisoners and guards all share a meal together. And somehow they find enough strength to make it to the shore the next morning. So may this story serve as a reminder for us today that even in the times when we feel out of control and our old scripts are no longer serving us or keeping us safe, that hope and a good meal with friends can take us a long way. And may it remind us that sometimes crashing is the only thing we can do to get to safety. And maybe that is exactly what we need to do so that we can learn to start all over again. Amen.
Amen.
So if you have any communion pieces, now is the time to grab them. If you have juice and bread, today I'm having a 2-day-old donut and some cold coffee because it's been sitting here for a while. That is okay, because in this communion meal, what Jesus did in his story is that he took the ordinary gifts, the things that were regular, and he took them and he blessed them and he broke them and he gave them to his friends to bless them as well, to give them strength for another day. In our reading today, Paul has his own kind of communion. It says that just before daybreak, Paul urged all of them to take some food, saying, "Today is the 14th day that you have been in suspense and remaining without food, having eaten nothing. And for us, it may have been 2 years of being in a pandemic, or even longer in bad relationships or in bad scripts or old patterns that are no longer serving us. It's been a long time and we're tired. So therefore, I urge you to take some food, for it will help you survive. For none of you will lose a hair from your heads," as Paul tells us. So after he said this, he took the bread, and after giving thanks to God in the presence of all of these people in that boat, he broke it, and he began to eat it. Then all of them were encouraged and took food for themselves. So I encourage you to break your food, to eat it, to share it with one another. And if you have a drink, you can also do that as well. We're going to do it here, and I might even give my dog some as well.
Well, once again, we come to our end of our worship here together. Let us never forget that our ministry is actually out there in our everyday world. And in keeping with the sermon today, we need to remember that even when we get overwhelmed, we should never forget how big our God is. That no matter what, God is there and God is actually in control. And how fitting, I showed this to a few people before we started today, but a friend of mine, just sometimes out of the blue, will send me stuff. And especially knowing now what has been going on, sent me a little bookmark. He's Catholic, wonderful man. And this actually comes from the Novena of Abandonment. How fitting. But it says, oops.
You'll have to read it to us, Joe, because we
Okay.
won't be able to see it.
Okay, it says, "Oh, Jesus, I surrender to you. Take care of everything." So just remember, as you go out in the world, Do what God has put you here to do, and God will take care of the rest. Keep that in your
Amen.
heart. Keep it in your step. Keep it in your mind, and keep it out in front of your fellow humans. Go in peace.